it is my pleasure to introduce the person who has run the largest number of bills and kept this issue alive in the state legislature over the last couple of years. Love the bills, hate the bills, tell us they're not enough, fine. Here's the deal, is there is one legislator who has enthusiastically pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed to make sure that this issue stays at the top of the list. And so I am excited to introduce to you all Representative Mike Foote.
But this is a great looking room with lots of folks that are really interested in this issue. And actually, I remember when Logic first started, it was a much smaller room, and there weren't as many people around or enthusiastic about this issue. And so it's really good to see you all out here to help everybody push this forward. So I'm also very happy to be involved with this panel. This is a very esteemed panel of folks that have been on the front lines of the Front Range fracking fights. Try to say that 5 times really fast. And Sonya, who will be on the front lines there, representing House District 12 in the next couple of years at least at the State House. So I was going to ask a few questions to start it off. And first of all, we'll start with Kevin over here and then just go to the end to introduce yourselves briefly. Well, hold on, just for a minute or so. And then once we get the microphone back, I'll ask a question, and maybe I'll ask another one, and then we'll see where that goes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A from the floor as well to hear. But just FYI, these folks here are local officials. I think you might have already been told this. Local officials that have been dealing with drilling in their areas. And so they're dealing with folks that are very concerned about it justifiably and trying to navigate being able to be responsive to constituents, but also push the state to be better as well. And this is a difficult area to be in. I hope next year at the legislature we can change that, and we can change it so that local officials can be much more responsive to their constituents and be much more responsive to health and safety than they've been able to do up to this point. But I know the folks that are sitting up here have been fighting that fight for quite some time, and I think they'll have some good things to add. So having said that, Kevin.
Thank you very much. Kevin Kreeger. I was elected to Broomfield City Council in 2015. Broomfield has been kind of the epicenter of trying to regulate and control and exercise local control against oil and gas for the last few years. We're not the center of the drilling in the state, that's obviously Weld, but I think that we're at the center of trying to advance people's rights and exercise authority over the drilling. I've participated in the community in several different ways, and long before moving to Colorado have always volunteered in my community. There's never been anything that I've done in the community, though, that I consider more important and more of an honor and more of a privilege than representing people, and especially on the issue of oil and gas. And it's a pleasure to be here at the Logic Summit. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Steve Douglas, Commerce City Council at large. First moved into Commerce City in 2004, my family. And I ran 3 times before I got on City Council, so I didn't get in my first or second time. Since then, 2011, we had oil and gas come in, and they did frack an area. It was an enclave in the Adams County. We did not have a designee as far as seeing that come in and being able to speak out and testify and all the things that you're supposed to do to affect change. And I know earlier my wife had made a comment about being an elected official, being African American, and being in a room with folks like yourself, all Caucasians, white. It is. Wherever I go around the country, I'm in a room like this. They do. They do. They don't have to say, hey, you look like so-and-so. Doesn't work that way. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve my citizens because I tell you, when you're elected official and you speak out, that's what people notice and remember. They may not remember your face, but they remember what you said, okay? And plus, would you back that up? And that's very important. I want to appreciate Susan Noble also for being here from North Range Concerned Citizens. And that's just it. You elected official, I try to get everybody else to hold us accountable. And that is tough. Because when you get in a position, When it comes to staff, I tell you, it's a whole different ballgame because they want to pamper you and all this and do things for you. That's not how it works because you're accountable to the people who elected you. So I know we're going to ask questions and everything, but if you look at a map here on the wall there, as you're coming in, that's from North Range Concerned Citizens, and if you look at those little blue arrows, little lines, those are potentially oil wells that's going to come to Commerce City. And down below, you see that big brown area. It's 26 square miles of Rocky Mountain Wildlife Refuge, which used to be, well, still is, the most toxic piece of land on Earth. It's not a supersite fund. And then just to the east of that is a landfill, which holds, a methane and all, and they want to go underneath that. And it's a big, huge concern. It's just like messing with a volcano that has been sitting for millions of years, and now you're going to hit that, and that's not a good thing. So I'm here to speak about Commerce City and policies and procedures as far as being elected official. So let's get the ball rolling. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Sonya Jaquez-Lewis. I'm representative-elect from House District 12. That is Louisville, Lafayette, and Eastern Longmont. And I'm going to attempt to fill the shoes of this man right over here, Mike Foote. He's a size 10. I'm a size 7. So we're going to see what happens with that. I'm very lucky to be here for a variety of reasons. This issue is very personal to me because my wife and I are oil and gas impacted Coloradans, but there are two people in the room. I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for them, and those are my neighbors, Nina and Lise-Net, right over here. They really organized our neighborhood in a way that I thought would be impossible. We're a spread out neighborhood, so I live in the Crestone Peak CDP. So if you're not familiar with that, I didn't bring a nice map. That's a good idea. I like that map. Okay, yeah, we've got to get one of those, don't we? I think we do. So we're in between Longmont and west of Erie, and then you come down towards Erie. Crestone has designated that as a comprehensive drilling area. We're now down to 3 large production pads. Is that right? Is it 3 or 3? 3 sites. Yeah, it was going to be. I think initially. Yeah, 104. It was when it started out. It was a nightmare. It was like 7 massive production pads on a heritage farm road that is pristine. The farms had been in that location for almost 200 years. Just a gorgeous area. It's where cyclists come. The Venus de Miles, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's the wonderful bike fundraising event that a lot of women do to raise scholarship money. It's a runner's paradise. It is just, it's a sanctuary for birds. It's a migration path. There's an eagle's nest there. It's absolutely gorgeous, and they came after us. And basically, that's what put me over the edge. I was like, that's it. I'm running for office, and we're going to stop this. So I had no idea really what I would be getting into from the perspective of when they say they're coming after you, they do. But I'm very, very excited. I'm very determined to work on this issue. We get 5 bills. I'm a first year, by the way. We don't say freshman anymore. We say first year because we are trying to change the way we talk in our legislature because words are powerful. So we are now in one of the first years. There's 16 of us. There will be 18 of us. And I can tell you more about that later. I don't want to take up all my time on this panel for that. But we have so many energetic first years coming in. And hopefully I'll get a chance to talk more about the big plans that a lot of us have. So thank you for inviting me. And I'm here to learn and to also maybe give some answers too. So.
I'm Commissioner Eva Henry from Adams County. I've been a local elected for over 11 years now. In 2007, I ran for Thornton City Council, basically to have clean, safe streets is the main reason why you run for city council. Didn't have a clue on what was coming ahead of me. Around 2009, 2010, there was a bill that was being run through the State House that exempt the Wattenberg Basin from any standardized water testing. Now, what a lot of people don't seem to realize is the city of Thornton is the largest landowner in Weld County. And the reason why is because they own water rights. So having no water quality testing done in the Wattenberg area actually threatens the water quality of not only the city of Thornton, which is 130,000 citizens, but over 60,000 citizens in unincorporated Adams County, and 110,000 citizens in Westminster, and over 60,000 citizens in Brighton. And no one was there to say, this isn't right, this isn't fair, they can't do it. It was my very first time of going up against gas and oil, and I walked in, introduced myself, sat down, and even with my testimony, I was the only one that was testifying against it. Obviously, it passed. So now the Wattenberg area doesn't have any baseline water testing in that area, which is really, really sad. And then in 2012, and then I also went up and did some testifying on the methane gas, which, that actually did pass, which was absolutely wonderful on our air quality. And then in 2012, I ran for county commissioner. Huge race, it's 3 state senate districts. I was used to running in a small little 30,000 people. I went up to 500,000 people. What was really unusual about that race in 2012 is the Koch brothers put up over $100,000 against me. And I wasn't even aware of why. I was like, why would they care about, a county commissioner race in Adams County? I mean, really, why? What do you think about? And I actually think Sarah was one of them that came up to me and says, you got to be prepared. The oil boom is going to be huge in Adams County, and you better be ready for it. And she was right. Right now, within the last 6 months, we have 700 wells to be permitted in Adams County. We have 23 gas and oil producers in Adams County. So we're not going up against, just one gas producer. We're going up against 23. And I need you all there to help me. And not only do I need you all there, I need you there to talk to my fellow commissioners and explain to them how important this is, how urgent it is, but we have to keep it civil, because what they're trying to do, what Gas and Oil is trying to do, they did it with Broomfield and Adams County by putting 80 oil wells up against Adams County lines to try to start a feud between Broomfield and Adams County. They're doing it with you all, fighting amongst yourselves about who is the most, anti-gas and oil person. We got to stop the bickering, and we got to start coming together. And I need your support. I need you to come together, and I need your support. So I'm really hoping we can have a good conversation today about how that looks and what that looks like.
Hi, everyone. I'm not an elected official, just to put that out there. My name is Jillian Coffey, and I work at Siegel Public Affairs. So myself and my boss, Carolyn Siegel, represent Logic down at the Capitol. So I see lots of familiar faces in the room from last session down at the Capitol. My job at Siegel is a little bit different. I'm not just a lobbyist. My title is an Advocacy Associate. So at Siegel, we really want to make sure that community voices are being brought to the Capitol in an organized way, as well as translating what's all the craziness at the Capitol to community members, so we can make sure to be as impactful and effective when we are at the Capitol. This past session, I was so very lucky to work alongside many of the activists in the room, and Sarah and her beautiful baby, to prepare testimony as well as set one-on-one meetings with a lot of our elected officials. As I'm sure many of you know, we worked very hard on the forced pooling legislation this past session, and I personally was able to see the direct impact that community members' voices can have on elected officials. Forced pooling, as everyone in the room knows, is a very complicated and very contentious issue in Colorado. So it was really important for us as Logic and as a member-based organization to kind of change that conversation at the Capitol, that it's not oil and gas, it's not just oil and gas and environmentalism, it's oil and gas, environmentalism, and the community members impacted by both of those things. And bringing a community voice to the Capitol where people are just saying, this is my experience, this is what's happening to me in my backyard, completely changed the way that we were being received by elected officials at the Capitol. And I think that it is so important. I feel so very lucky to sit on this panel with these amazing local elected officials, because I come from an organizing background. And I'm sure, you know, as ever long you've been involved with Logic, organizing is something that we're going to have to do forever. And organizing is the only way that we can win these battles. And I just cannot stress enough that using your voice at the Capitol is what we need to be doing. And it's a weird, wonky system, and they make it that way on purpose. They make it hard, they make it inaccessible, you know, they make you wait for 3 hours to testify. And I want all of you to know that please reach out to me. You can get my contact information from Lori or Judy or Sarah. I am here to just help make it as easy as possible for people to feel comfortable and empowered at the Capitol around these issues that are so, so important to our communities. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for being here again. And just a time check, we've got about a half an hour to go, so I'll ask a couple questions, then we'll open it up for Q&A. And by the way, just one thing that Jillian talked about having to wait around to testify. You probably have, if you've been down there, you've seen that. Although not in front of the committees that I chaired, I always called the regular people first and then the oil and gas lobbyists last. So they just had to wait. They were getting paid anyway, so. Okay, so the first question I want to ask all five of you, and if you could just, I mean, there's a lot to talk about here, of course, but if you could just try to do it in somewhat of a short way so we can get a couple questions in. I'm wondering, I mean, everyone here knows that the landscape has changed since the last legislative session, and for the better when it comes to oil and gas. Instead of a few legislators running bills and trying to get them through the House knowing that they're going to die in the Senate, we actually have a fighting chance on the state level. And then I think locals as well, and we have 112 and the popular support that was behind that, all have contributed to a changed landscape. So with that in mind, if you could maybe let us know, in your opinion, what are the top two things that we should be doing this next year, either on the local or the state level, or grassroots level, just whatever comes to mind. And also the second part of that is, if your answer is local control, what exactly do you mean by local control? So we'll start with Kevin, and then on the next question, we'll start with Jillian, just to kind of make it go back and forth.
Thank you very much. A great question, and I think it's all got to be based on health and safety. I think that there are other community impacts that have to be taken into consideration, like truck traffic, tens of thousands of truck trips for a single pad potentially, and the damage that causes to roads and the noise and stuff. But it's got to start with health and safety. I think the number one thing is that we get a new director of CDPHE, somebody that can come in and actually say that the studies are definitely showing that living in close proximity to drilling is dangerous on people's health, whether it's childhood leukemia or impacts on the endocrine system or anything else. And I think that we have to look at safety. When there are explosions and fires, these things sometimes evacuate people for a half mile or a mile around. Sometimes they burn too hot for the crews to even get anywhere close enough to fight it, and sometimes that's for a day or multiple days. You don't know what's burning and what kind of crap that's putting into the air that you're then breathing. You don't know if fires will lead to explosions, and we have to be looking at the health data, which are impacts to our body and our health directly, and safety data, which is more like fires, explosions, and spills, and we have to be figuring out how to regulate this industry in a way that protects people's health and safety. My background is doing quality assurance work, mostly for medical device companies and pharmaceutical companies. These are products that can have great benefit to our life in terms of extending life and improving quality of life, but they have to be regulated extremely strictly, because if you take a drug or you have a device that's implanted and then you realize later it doesn't work right, it's catastrophic to the people that took it. Or if one device isn't working right, maybe catastrophic to the one person with it implanted. We have to remember that gas and oil impacts hundreds or thousands of people at a time, and that it can be regulated better. There are models that exist. The pharma and medical device industries are not perfectly regulated, but they are regulated so much better than oil and gas that they could be a model for how we regulate oil and gas the way it stands now. Again, not that they're perfect, but wow, if we did that for oil and gas, it would be a different world already. And that's a world I live in. I can tell you that these things can be done, and they can be based on science. At the local level and the state level, there's nothing more important than using science and looking at health, safety, and regulating through the lens of those two things, health, safety, and science.
Thank you. I agree on all those terms that you just said. And I have to say that I'm here on my own accord. I'm not here representing Commerce City. I have to make that noted when I'm down testifying, that I'm here on my own accord, not representing the city, because I don't want to hear when something comes up that, hey, you can't vote on that because you spoke on that for the city. I'm not here for speaking of the city. I'm here for the citizens of Commerce City, but not for the city, not for the council. So it's two different things. I say for me, you know, I'm on a CML policy committee, and we'd had a meeting yesterday. So it's the word preemption. When it comes to local control, I know it was stated earlier about you can't have both, and if the local control, you know, then they're deciding what's going on. It really should be something in this, when it comes from the state, it should be a mandate that, just like we do with marijuana. You're allowed to do marijuana, but then the cities could say, we don't want it, okay? Prohibit this, that, and the other. They can do that. That's local control. You're controlling what comes in. Agricultural. You cannot, if I want to grow corn, I can't grow in the middle of the city. I have to go out and be a zone agricultural area. So zoning is really important. So preemption, local control, those are things that we could talk a long time on. But just to put it out there, we need courageous lawmakers. We need folks who just got elected, yeah, congratulations on you being elected. The term freshman, there's no freshman, because that means that you're weak. Wait your turn. When you get elected, you're up. That is your turn. The day you get sworn in, you're on the clock. That's how things work. So let's put it out there. Let's be bold and courageous, put things out there. The governor's here earlier today, and we need to challenge him on that, because there really should be a timeout, a moratorium from the state, and that's something the governor can do. And that's what we need. And all elected officials down the front range should really join forces together, so we're talking the same language. We need to walk and talk the same, because when we hear we're going to get sued, they don't have money for that, okay? It's just all talk. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to ditto what Kevin said about putting public health and citizen safety first. I'm a pharmacist by training, and when a new drug comes to market, they have to go through many phases, millions of dollars before a new drug comes on the market. They have to prove it's safe. This industry has never gone through that kind of scrutiny. I would love to see what we could do to change that. But to Mike's direct question about the two things that I see that we will see bills coming forward, because I know folks that are going to be introducing those bills, and I know that they want to craft this taking advantage of the opportunity that we have, the best opportunity in years to regulate this industry, is in local control. I would like to see municipalities like the one in our district, Lafayette, passing a pollution tax. I'd like to be able to see them be able to do that without having to turn around and spend tens of thousands of dollars hiring attorneys to make sure they're not going to get sued. And St. Boulder passed it too. I also want to see Erie, what's happening with Erie in the odor ordinance. As soon as they had the first claim on it, they got sued. And that has recently been settled, but think of the money that was spent to fight that off. I want to see local control so that municipalities and counties do not have to worry about that. I just had a call from a citizen this week. I'm not sworn in yet, but he called me up. He's my neighbor. He called me up and he said, it was the morning that was really cold and the fog. I don't know if you remember it this week. And he said they were doing flowbacks, and the temperature inversion made it so that all the flowback came right into his house, right into that area. We have to be able to have local control so that that is not allowed, or if it happens, they are penalized. So those are the two things that I would love to be able to see, is that they would, and the other second thing, which I didn't name, is reforming the COGCC. And I actually, they warn us, don't talk about your bills, don't talk about, because then people will bombard you. I'm telling you right now, that's going to be one of my bills, reforming the COGCC. I'm telling you right now.
Well, since I can't talk about give my land use authority back to me, so I have local control, that would help. That's the first thing I would like to see. Another thing I would like to see is the fact that the drillers or the oil producers actually notify a local community, whether if it's in a different county or a different municipality, that they're putting wells right next to their line, their border, so they can at least comment on it. That happened between Broomfield and Adams County. Broomfield had the extraction, which I hate extraction. They moved. I hate extraction. I know, but I hate extraction. But they moved their wells that they're going to put in Broomfield 1,000 feet from homes in Adams County. Still in Broomfield, but it's 1,000 feet. My citizens didn't have an opportunity to comment on that because they were given 2 weeks' notice. And that was just wrong. The COGCC didn't even allow them to comment, and that's just wrong. So if we could have that, that would be awesome. Now I'm going to tell you what you can do during the state legislation and for local controls. Get to know your state legislator personally. Don't let them off the hook. I have, every time someone comes in front of my dais and says, you need, I'm like, have you contacted your state legislator, Kevin Prioli? And most likely, they haven't. So, or at the time it was Beth Humanek, but now we have Faith Winters. Yeah, so, we don't have to worry about that. But I would say, get to know them, call them, invite them for coffee, talk to them, give them a beer, because that's what the lobbyists do. They become friends with you. And I know this personally because the gas and oil producers, whenever they come into the county, they call up and have a meeting with me. And I take everybody. I'm not, I don't discriminate. Doesn't mean we have to get along, but, they come into my office. But the thing is I've seen commissioners on my board get really close to these gas and oil people. They become friends with them. They see them at the Chamber of Commerce, or they see them at the Adams County Economic Development Luncheon. And so they get to know them on a personal level. So that way, when something comes down, then they actually are able to pull those friendship strings. So you need to become a friend of your state legislator, your state senator, your city council member, and your county commissioners. Except for those of you who have Barb Kirkmeyer, and I feel for you. Oh.
So actually, just to completely piggyback off of that point, as we sit, because I cannot speak from an elected official point of view, as a citizen as well as someone who's at the Capitol a lot, the pulling on the friendship strings are very important, and many of our activists from the Logic team who were down last session, definitely we hung out with Matt Gray a whole lot, me and Jean. And when Jean walked into the room, Matt Gray knew it was time to get down to business around forced pulling. But also, I think it's so important as we talk about all of these really, important ideas and, these bills that we want to imagine, it's really important that we are gathering and recording personal stories. Because the way that we connect with elected officials that we do not have those friendships with, that maybe we don't talk to all the time, is through a personal story. And all of you have been motivated to get involved with Logic or your local community group for a reason. And being able to take the time as you come to things like this to write your story down so that we can make it something that we can talk about at the Capitol. You're ready with your 3-minute pitch when you're down at the Capitol, or when you're calling and leaving a voicemail, because you want your personal story to be in the back of that legislator's mind when they're voting on that bill. You want them thinking about not only local control, but why, that person that told you about why they care about local control, about, someone in Adams County who didn't get to talk to anyone about how there was going to be a well really close to their house just because they lived over the line. 80 wells. Yeah. So I think that obviously my perspective is a little bit different from everyone else's on the panel, but I want to really urge you all. Me and Sarah have talked about this for a while. I'm really trying to build like a binder full of all of these activist stories and photos. Take photos of this crazy stuff happening near your home, sorry. And I just really personal stories go so very far at the Capitol, because elected officials they hear from lobbyists all the time. They hear from me all the time. They want to hear from people who are being impacted by it. No matter what side of the aisle they're on, they're so much more likely to sit down and actually listen. Yeah. Hey, last year a bunch of Logic activists, we got a meeting with Vicki Marble, and not that at the end we were on the same page, but we had a nice cordial meeting where we talked about it and we had stories shared, and it's in their mind somewhere, behind some other stuff, but it's in there. And I think that that's important, and I really do. I just want to urge you all to do some story creation.
Okay, so one thing I would just mention, for those of you that said that you were represented by Perry Buck or Vicki Marble, just remember they're both term limited in 2020. So what that means, though, is that candidate recruitment starts now, right? Diane Primavera was being asked about the Vicki Marble seat, but she got preoccupied with something else at this point. So, but really, if you can find candidates that are willing to go out on a limb and really talk about these issues, even in districts that are red districts or reddish districts, then it's going to matter. That's going to help quite a bit. Okay, so the last two speakers went into the question that I was going to ask next, which was basically what is it that the grassroots, that activists, that regular people can do? And I think they covered the topic pretty well. So since we only have about 15 minutes until the breakout, I think what we'll do is we'll just open it up to Q&A if anybody has any questions for this panel. In the back.
My name is Barb Millsbury, and I'm the president of Be the Change, and I just wanted to let everybody know that we have written up talking points for the top legislative ideas. We're going to send that to Ann Lee and to get comments on those. But then those would be, we were told by people, volunteers, I'll go talk to my representative or my senator, but I don't know what to say. I need talking points. So we're going to get that out, and hopefully through Colorado Rising and other groups, get that out to all of your constituents so they can go talk to their legislators with something behind them.
Yeah, thank you for that. And one thing that I'll mention is talking points are good to have background and to give folks confidence. But really, I think Jillian might have mentioned it before, personal stories are actually the best things to bring to legislators, because just think about how folks talk to normal people all the time. You connect through the personal story. Talking points are good, and that information is good to have. So you want to have that, but you also don't want to ignore the fact that you really need to emphasize the personal story of what it means to be fracked 500 feet away from your house.
And nothing's better than sitting across a coffee or a table where you're drinking coffee, or you're sharing a dessert, and you're sharing that story with that legislator. It just brings it a whole lot more personal, and it really you're able to connect more like human beings as opposed to going into their office and sitting across their desk.
Are you can you buy the coffee and the dessert or whatever are you allowed to pick up the tab?
We're only allowed, what, $64? $64.
So
if you want to buy me dinner, Christy, for $64, you can do it.
So FYI, lobbyists cannot purchase anything for legislators but there's a $64 limit. So you can buy a legislator a cup of coffee if you're not a registered lobbyist, just so. Okay, Heidi, you're next.
So Jean Lim and Neil and I did talk to the Attorney General-elect, Phil Weiser, and his team, and this is like during the summer, right after the primary, and we really wanted to give him our personal story and actually show him what these wells are going to look like. So they said, oh, come down to Denver, and we're like, no, you guys come up here. So we had him come up and see exactly where these wells are going to go, really close to our future drinking water reservoir that we had planned as a city. And it actually really did. You could just tell he was thinking a lot differently than he was before, just visualizing it. Can you guys think of a story, either of yourself personally or what you've heard through other, I don't know if you could speak to this or not, or other legislators, of something that really like made them click or made them think a lot more heavily about oil and gas, and what gravitated as a result?
I think you probably remember the story that Joe Salazar was telling about a legislator that was actually trying to pass a bill that was going to give eminent domain to gas and oil. Well, that happens to be a fellow commissioner of mine. She is now a county commissioner. Mary Hodge. Yeah, she's infamous. So what kind of started changing her mind is, one, as a state legislator, she could no longer hide behind 100 people when she made a decision, because you're a little more accountable when you're on local government. Another thing is the fact you don't have the party, supporting you in whatever screw up you do. There's no one there to help you out. If you screw up, you chew on your foot for a while. And so when you have someone coming from the state legislation into local government, they see things a little differently. And with Mary, she all of a sudden was getting stories from people where it was during the Broomfield deal where they moved the wells to 1,000 feet to the homes. And she realized that it was dangerous. She went over there to their houses and saw how close it was going to be to their houses. She talked to the people that were being impacted. She signed a letter along with the rest of us, asking Broomfield to give us, to slow the process down, to give us an opportunity to make statements on it, or at least be able to let them know how it was going to impact our community. She signed that letter, and after she signed that letter and we sent it to Broomfield, the extraction lobbyist texted her and said, I regret ever meeting you. And I can't remember what else he said, but it was just a really nasty text to her. She showed me that text, and she goes, regulate the hell out of them.
Sorry, if you have heard me speak at any of these before, I always like to praise Jean Lim a little, because she is someone who I got to watch her not only change people's minds, but really change the trajectory of a piece of legislation just from, spending a lot of time at the Capitol, which not everyone has that time, but really, not only making sure we were holding the line on a piece of legislation, but explaining to Democrats who are like, I don't know, does this go far enough? And, she was able to say, my community needs this right now. This is so very crucial, and was able, because, there was a lot of contention around that bill, and we were able to get people to say, hey, there's a community that is down here, and they are begging us to pass this bill. We need to do it. So I was able to, not only watch her change people's minds, but also really shift a conversation around an issue. And you were also there, Heidi, but yeah.
Just a quick one, because since I'm a newbie on this, I haven't actually had to go in and describe it to one of my legislators, because I have two of the best, Mike Foote and Matt Jones. But I will share a story when Nina and Lee and I and other neighbors were actually doing outreach to our own neighbors because they didn't know what to expect, right? Our neighborhood had not had anything come to us. So what we did was we went and collected stories off of the oil and gas monitoring page for Erie. And these were stories about children that had developed asthma, nosebleeds, the personal stories. We took those to our neighbors and we said, this is what's coming at us. And I would read them the stories. And they were like, I had no idea. So I'm emphasizing what Jillian's saying, what Eva's saying. The personal piece really did make a difference for me. And it scared my fellow neighbors as we were organizing against Crestone.
The question was stories that are impactful. A story that I tell people a lot is about Erie, just to the north of Broomfield. It's been very impactful on a lot of people who think that oil and gas drilling is fine to have in residential areas. And that's it during one of the projects in Erie, because there have been so many, but just one of them during the flowback phase, which is when the produced water and the fracking fluids come back up. That's when the most toxicity is released into the air. It's the biggest chunk of it, and it can go on for a long time. There was a neighborhood that had 150 people roughly call into the COGCC medical emergency hotline to report things like ongoing nosebleeds. Some of those people had persistent nosebleeds for weeks, respiratory issues, eye irritation, throat irritation, pets, dogs especially, throwing up. So how many people know that there's a COGCC emergency hotline in that neighborhood? You know, I know that people probably started telling their neighbors there's a hotline you can call, but my point is, if 150 people called, how many people did not call? Okay? And my other point is, if you are breathing so much toxicity that the toxins cause your nose to bleed, is that really the only health issue you're experiencing? I would bet to you that it's only a symptom and a sign of the toxicity that you have been inhaling. And it is not ultimately the worst health condition that, unfortunately, you're likely to experience because of that. And let's remember that it's the oldest and the youngest among us, I hate to say it this way, but people who physically may be the weakest in a community who are the first to be impacted by these things. So a lot of times that's elderly people and babies. And when I talk about it being in Erie as opposed to in general, I think it strikes home because people can picture where Erie is. They understand it's a community and a neighborhood I'm talking about, and this isn't some theoretical story of something that happened in some place that they have never heard of and can't picture. It's right there in Erie, which touches Broomfield, and I think that's part of what makes the personal story impactful on a lot of people.
I just want to say quickly that so far we haven't had that type of industry come to Commerce City, and I'm praying that it won't happen, but it's going to take a lot of weight in support from other communities, which has come to Commerce City's chambers and speak out on their health, safety, and welfare, how it has hurt their community and themselves, their family members. So we've had outsiders come in to speak to our council, because we don't have those experiences, we don't have those stories to tell. And those are powerful. And then we have extraction, they're at the door right now knocking, and they're only going to give the city $34 million. We have over $1 billion worth of future capital improvement projects that we have to fund and support from our communities and companies who are already there. So those personal stories that have impacted other people in other cities who are adjacent or within a front range is huge. And so I really appreciate Heidi coming down and others to come down and speak to our council, because they don't know that. We're a council of 9, and I'm the one who really speaks out. So I've gotten a couple of them to ask tough questions. So I'm still working on the other 5. So trust me, it's not an easy process.
And I'll just add really quick, I know that a couple folks have talked about gathering photos and making sure you have those with the personal stories. I certainly can attest to the effectiveness of that. When you show a photo to people, I mean, the first best thing is for them to go on the Tour de Frac, which has been happening in Erie, and that's really a good thing, but I'm not sure if Perry Buck is going to do that. And so, but there's plenty of folks that photos can really matter. There's one photo in particular that I use all the time with the school setbacks bill, and that was a photo of a high school in Greeley. Somebody was, they were setting up chairs for graduation, outdoor graduation on the football field sometime in May, and somebody took a photo of where the drill rig was compared to where this graduation was going to happen. And it's been out there, so it's a fairly well-known photo. And it's a very good photo. And so I put it up on the overhead screen on the floor and just sit there for a couple minutes and let people look at it. And you can tell it's effective because all the Republicans start buzzing around like a bunch of bees trying to figure out how they're going to get the photo taken down and all that. So I think the photos are important. So let's see, this will probably be our last question. Kate.
All right. So the personal, I'm a loud talker, it's okay. Okay. So these personal stories are like why we need to do something. And you guys are how we're gonna do something. Right. I guess my question as an attorney who then tries to like hold people accountable for the laws we've already passed is, you know, I feel like me, Dan, Mike, Matt, we've been in this for a while. We have some insights on, you know, like the history of regulatory reform where, you know, we've been sort of hip deep in these legal issues. How do we have conversations with the legislators and with all of the communities about, you know, so for example, these regulatory attempts at reform are not new. They started in 1985, and 3 times we've had significant amendments to the act to try to get health and safety protected. And each time there's been different legal ways that this was turned against, actually, and used to even further disempower local governments and still not protect, actually, public health and safety. So how do we get together to brainstorm with the lawmakers and the citizens and the attorneys about actually like what we're gonna do so that we don't get fooled again? Because the last time was in 2007 and it wasted a decade of time while things just got worse and worse, and it's only now that we're starting to build this momentum up again, and I don't want to see us get tricked again, and I don't know what to do about that.
Who wants to take that?
While they're thinking about it, I'll give it to you, Kevin, and then we'll go down the line. I would just say, Kate, that you know, presenting language to legislators about how they could amend the act, I think, is quite effective. I mean, the way that I'm sure many of you know this, but really what happens, the legislator goes to the bill drafter and says, hey, I want to do this, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and the bill drafter comes up with language. Typically, the bill drafter knows what they're doing, but you as an attorney or other attorneys or people that have been fighting this fight, presenting language to the legislator, then that legislator can just say to the bill drafter, put this in a bill, and then you can start circulating it around and see what people think about it. So that's just a small suggestion for me.
So at the state level, we need a new director of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. We need a new director of COGCC. There are 7 commissioners in COGCC. 4 have terms expiring this July, and 3 have terms expiring next July. And I think at the local level, until things change at the state level, something that Broomfield did that I'd encourage all communities to do at the state, at the city and county levels, create your own regulations as best you can. And here's what I mean by as best you can. They have to be as strong as you can make them. You are going to be prevented from doing certain things that are the right of the state to do right now. And I hate to say it because it's unpopular because people don't want to hear it, but if you were to say we're going to have 2,500-foot setbacks, the courts would likely strike that down in a district court. It's not going to go far because the state pretty clearly regulates setbacks right now. Not well and not based on science, but you need to make these as strong as possible in terms of not being challenged and struck down immediately, because then they're worth nothing to you. So what Broomfield did was work with a couple great attorneys. One of them had worked with Boulder County previously to develop their new regulations. And we looked for every last place where the state didn't regulate things, and we operated in those areas, and then we pushed our regulation to the border of those areas. It's not everything you would want in oil and gas regulation, because it isn't all based on science and health and safety as it should be. But where the state's rights end, we looked at every little nook and cranny where we could take local control, and then we built out those regulations in those spaces. In some of the early drafts of our regulation, there were 2 or 3 or 4 things that were clearly preempted by state law, and some of that was determined by old case law. It was going to get struck down immediately. Too much of that in your local ordinances, and a court is going to look at it and say, I already see 12 things that I know aren't legal here. It's going to make it look like it's all kind of weak and probably wouldn't stand up. You want to have local ordinances that look strong to a court, so when you go in there, the gas and oil industry has an extremely difficult time arguing against them. And I would say that if you're talking about or asking what can we do right now before more has changed at the state, because that's going to really determine the direction that municipalities and counties can go. But for right now, create local ordinances that are as strong as they can be in the space that you're allowed to operate so that they stand up in court. 2, this is going to be super quick, work with other municipalities and counties. We all have to be doing that better. It was a shame what happened when Broomfield Wells got put on the border of Adams County. That was something I spoke against and was vehemently against. That was absolute, I don't know what to call it, tragedy, that we would put our garbage right on the border of another county. What that did was create a little bit of a border war, not between Eva and I, because we know that we are aligned, and not between other people too. But it can create a municipal border war. What we have to be doing is the opposite, working together. What just happened in Erie, they just approved an MOU that their residents came out in force to talk against. I talked at 2 of their Board of Trustee meetings against it, and many of our residents here went to those meetings and talked against it. But one of the things that was infuriating is we touch Broomfield, we touch Erie. And we've been fighting this for 2 years. And they didn't reach out once to council members like myself or our staff to find out how they can make their MOU as strong as possible. What are their legal options? What are things we already tried? What are our advice? And a number of us said, why? Why? Aren't we in this together? But they acted in very much of a silo. And it wasn't every single one of them. I especially want to give props to Christian van Woutenberg, but it was basically done in a silo. We're hurting ourselves that way. What are we doing? We're hurting ourselves. We have to work together as cities and counties to understand best practices, what everybody's doing, what's worked, what's failed. Let's not keep reinventing the wheel. Let's be a massive, strong, powerful team.
Oh, do you want me to? Really quickly. To that point, Kevin, I just had a meeting with Louisville. So I have Lafayette, I have Eastern Longmont, a sliver of Eastern Longmont, and I have Louisville. Louisville is not affected right now by oil and gas. And when I was campaigning in Louisville, they really weren't interested, to be honest, because they don't think they're impacted yet. So I just had a meeting yesterday. Yeah, wait, they are going to be impacted, because I just had a meeting with the entire city and staff of Louisville. And I said, look, here are your open space areas around Louisville. You just see that Superior, right, Tammy? Superior is impacted. I said, here's where they're coming for you. These open spaces, you're next. And they were like, light bulb. They were like, yep, and we don't know what we're going to do. And I said, you need to start thinking about municipal rules so that you will be prepared, because your citizens are unaware that this is coming for them. So just that quick story I wanted to let you know. And this is something you can be doing. Spread the word. If someone lives near open space and we're in this basin, they're going to be impacted.
Thank you. Yes, when it comes to regulation, we had a discussion back in 2011, 2012. We put in some really strong regulations in Commerce City. Well, 2018, our attorney, he's new and young, and he looked at that and said, hey, we need to maybe look at adjusting some things so we don't get challenged or sued by the industry. Well, the industry has not come, they're not there yet. But we don't want to put regulations in that rolls the red carpet at. So it looks like, hey, when it comes to best management practices, the best management practice that I know of by going to other cities, Broomfield, Longmont, Thornton, and in the county, is not to have it at all, because that's not. And I know that's, you know, that's not being, well, I mean, it's truthful. But the way it is they want to come in, and we're told we'll have to allow them to come in based on our regulations and make it fair. We can't hurt them by impacting with fees or any kind of way that's going to hurt their production. But when you're elected official, you have a voice that carries a lot further than the citizens do, because you can take your voice to the next level, which is the governor. So I think we don't stop here today. I think next week we meet with the governor. We meet with them on a weekly basis, whether it's face-to-face or by text or email. But we have to be strong and courageous and push it forward, because January 2019 is coming soon.
I totally understand you feeling deceived about what happened in 2007. Really, really feel that way. And I think basically, for the most part, you know, we got to remember our state legislators are human. They have flaws. I know it's kind of hard to say, you know. There's plenty of times my family tells me I need to get over myself. But I can only address on local levels and how that works. And a lot of times, and since this is the last question, I'm going to give you guys all some tips on how you can help local electeds. One of the greatest thing is we just recently did a moratorium hoping that 112 would pass, or at least I was hoping 112 would pass. I was lucky enough to have the support of my other fellow commissioners to do the moratorium. That day that we were getting ready to vote on the moratorium, even after we had talked about it during a study session, and all 4 of them, we have 5, but only 4 are showing up. Because the Republican has given up. He doesn't show up. So with the 4 of us, you know, we were all on the same page, and we all wanted this moratorium. The following Tuesday, when we went to vote for the moratorium, one of my commissioners came up to me and goes, I don't know if I can do this. I haven't talked to anybody. Said API that you've been talking to. I haven't been talking to anybody, but I don't know if I can vote for this. I really don't know if I can vote for this. So I was able to reach out to a couple of my activist friends who happened to be sitting down with him and having coffees and beers and seeing him at social events, and kind of started pulling on the friendship strings. And I said, start texting him. He's going to vote against it. We have our cell phones on the dais. Start texting him. Pretty soon I get a text, you know, because we're a few rows down. Pretty soon I get a text from him saying, are you having your friends text me? Like, I go, I'm getting texts too. Granted, I started it, but I was getting texts too. You know, that's the way you make a difference, is you have the people like you that make a difference. Petitions, don't waste your time. It does not work, does not work, does not work. You could have a zillion names on the petitions. Petitions don't work. Handwritten postcards. Maybe not with the same message, but different messages. Have different messages on each postcard would probably be more impactful than having them mailed. And if you can get the home address of that state legislator or that county commissioner or that city council member, send it to their home. That's impactful. Showing up in person is impactful. Having coffee or a beer with your state legislator or with your city council member or your county commissioner, that's impactful. That's the things that you all could do to make a difference.
I think I better get a bigger mailbox.
So just, I want to, give praise where praise is due. I think that when, to your point, I am not an attorney, don't have a law degree, work with lots of attorneys. They should be at the center of every organizing policy idea and conversation. The organizing world in Colorado around oil and gas is amazing. It's filled with so many motivated individuals, but an idea can't go anywhere without it being able to be put into law. It can sound amazing in a community group meeting, but you need to be including people who can can kind of get you there before you have 6,000 people in a Facebook group talking about something that actually isn't legally possible, you know, and there are so many limitations around this issue in Colorado state law, and in our organizing, we need to organize with intention, knowing that we want to accomplish certain things, but whether we like it or not, there are going to be limitations around those things, and attorneys are the easiest and quickest way to help us understand that space. I think that's something that is so great about Logic, is that it brings all these different voices from all these different communities together to talk through these issues so that we can avoid things like people operating in silos in their communities and having the same battle over and over again, when we could have just, you know, started a little bit earlier in that first organizing conversation. Someone could have reached out to someone and said, I think that they're doing this somewhere else. I know someone in that community. I think that, at least for me, I think when you have someone who can talk to you about the law, not about what we hate about the law, but actually about the law and what it is, whether we like it or not, and how we can operate and how we can organize in a space to grow, is so important, especially more than ever when you're having those beers and you're having those coffees with your organizing, with your community member friends and with your elected officials, because as Representative Foote said, you know, bill drafters, they draft a lot of bills, so we need to help them as much as possible if we want the legislation to work the way we want it to work.
So just thank you very much to all of our panelists, and please give them one more round of applause.